On today's World Inside, China and Russia both seeking closer relations with a deeper, comprehensive strategic partnership. That's as Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Russia for a state visit and to join celebrations of victory in the Great Patriotic War. What's next for Sino-Russian ties?
Hello and welcome to World Inside with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live from Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a joint statement to further deepen the China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership of Coordination for a New Era on Thursday. They also together briefed the media in Moscow on the same day. Chinese President is paying a state visit to Russia as he joins the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Soviet Union's Great Patriotic War. And here are some details.
Chinese President Xi Jinping said that in the face of unprecedented global changes, China and Russia have continuously deepened political mutual trust and strategic coordination, maintained close coordination and cooperation in international affairs, and injected valuable stability and positive energy into the changing and turbulent world. She said China will work with Russia to shoulder the special responsibility as major countries of the world and permanent members of the UN Security Council. He added that at present, in the face of the countercurrent of unilateralism and the act of power politics and bullying in the world, the two sides should take a clear stand to jointly promote the correct historical perspective on World War II, safeguard the authority and status of the United Nations, resolutely defend the rights and interests of China, Russia, and the vast number of developing countries, and promote an equal and orderly multipolar world and a universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization. President Putin welcomed Xi's visit and his participation in the 80th anniversary of the Great Patriotic War victory commemorations. Putin says Russia sees China as a strategic partner and supports the One China principle. Putin emphasized their bilateral relationship as built on equality and mutual respect and not aimed at any third party. Following the talks, both presidents signed a joint statement to deepen their comprehensive strategic partnership. They witnessed the exchange of over 20 cooperation documents covering global strategic stability, biosecurity, digital economy, investment protection, customs quarantine, and film collaboration.
For more discussion on the latest development in Moscow, Alexander Lukin, academic head of the Institute of China and Contemporary Asia of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Good to see you, sir. Joining us in Shanghai, Zhao Long, deputy director of the Institute for Global Strategic and Security Studies with the Shanghai Institute for International Studies. Also in Beijing, here in the studio with me, Einar Tangen, senior fellow at the Taihe Institute and chairman of Asia Narratives. Gentlemen, good to see you. Now, we understand over the years, this is already the 40th meeting between the two presidents, the heads of state between China and Russia. And this time, during their joint press conference, Chinese President Xi Jinping talking about enjoy stable, healthy, high-level development thanks to joint efforts. Now, Mr. Zhao, you've been looking at China-Russia ties over the decade. Tell us more about exactly in this turbulent world, this visit, what kind of gesture is China trying to send?
Well, I think President Xi's visit to Russia at this critical moment carries profound strategic significance. We are witnessing actually the period marked by the deep global uncertainties, where the unilateralism, protectionism, all kind of a tariff war, trade war are happening on the ground. So again, this background, I think the China-Russian comprehensive partnership sends a clear signal, a message to the world that the major powers are still capable of engaging one another on the basis of equity, mutual respect, and shared interest, and also show our commitment to secure, uphold the so-called post-war world order, and also to aiming for creating more equal and sustainable global governance structure. So I think overall this state visit showing the world that both China and Russia are carrying out as the major power on our shoulder, our commitment to this so-called post-war world order.
Professor Lukin, From the Russian side, what do you think are some of the crucial signals Moscow is willing to send?
Well, I think that this is not just an ordinary visit. I mean, of course, Russia and China, Russian leaders and Chinese leaders meet quite often, at least once a year, but sometimes 5 times a year.
In multilateral platforms.
Yes, but this time it's very significant for Russia because this is 80th anniversary of the Second World War, which in Russia is called Great Patriotic War, as you rightly said, because Russia lost a lot of its citizens during this war, both combatant and non-combatant. It's tens of millions, but China also lost quite a lot of people, also tens of millions at least. And it's very important, I think, for both Russia and China that historically Russia and China were the leaders of the anti-Hitler coalition. Yes, the Allies, they were called, and they were not just members, but they were major members of the so-called Big Four. And this Big Four was in the foundation, were the main powers which founded the United Nations organization. They were called during the war after 1942 United Nations, so they are co-founders, I would say major co-founders of the United Nations. So in the document that was signed today, I think one of the first points is Russia and China stand for support the centrality of United Nations in the role of the United Nations in the international system. And this is important because other members of other allies, unfortunately, don't support this idea anymore, as we know. And it's important that 2 major allies still support it, and we see a great tradition.
Mr. Tangen, now since we are already being brought back to history by our other panelists, so let's focus on that a bit as to how much it is of resource for us to look at our world today and what needs to be cherished and what needs to be learned through history. Of course, it's not just the Second World War, but also the First World War that everybody remembers. So at this moment, what do you think when we are having so much instability and powers are trying to have multiple approaches to different regions of the world, that we can learn from that part of the history of Second World War and through the past 100 years, what we can learn together, in fact?
Well, it's always about the status quo versus those who want to change it. Ironically, the United States, which was the status quo, as you heard Professor Lukin say, is the one who's trying to impose a new world order, one that puts the United States at the center and has bilateral treaties with everybody else, in essence, using American power to force other nations into compliance. It's kind of a tributary system. Russia and China are standing on behalf of the third world, the rest of the world that does not want to be dominated. They do not want to go back to a colonial era under Europe or America. So at this point, you have 2 different entities lined up, but the economics and also in terms of both manufacturing and resources are now on the side of the global South, China, and Russia.
We understand in the earlier article written by the Chinese side, right before the Chinese president visit, there is a lot of mentioning of the developing world. So go to you, Mr. Zhao. Now we are seeing a very different world today. At this point, how much do you think this trade issue that everybody is concerned about can become a rallying issue for many to think about what kind of world we want today and stick to the important principles. In that regard, what does this visit mean?
Well, I think by the report, there were more than 29 leaders who are gathering in this ceremony. I think this signals that many of them are the leaders from developing countries, mainly from the global south countries. Or the leaders are gathering to show the consensus or the joint expectations that the major powers, mainly the China and Russia, to show their responsibility to stand up and to further against those unilateralism, in particular those trade wars, and to enhance so-called multi-layer, multipolarity in the future. So I think China and Russia are coordinating very closely on those platforms such as SCO and BRICS. So these platforms provided a unique opportunity for these countries to have their voices and to show their agenda and their vision about the future, which will be a non-Western style of multilateral cooperation. So I think that makes the great significance of President Xi's visit to Moscow.
We noticed that during the joint presser between the two presidents, the Russian president particularly talked about, according to the Xinhua News reports, imposing high tariffs, he said, is senseless and illegal, will only backfire. Professor Lukin, this is quite a clear statement. So what does that say about Russia's attitude toward what Washington and the Trump administration is trying to do today?
Well, the disruption of international economy, unfortunately, has begun quite some time ago with sanctions, unilateral sanctions applied by the West, by the United States and its allies to many countries, including Russia. And sanctions began a tool of international politics, unfortunately. And of course, this means that the United States, which for a long time, and the West for a long time, was supported free trade, means lowering tariffs, now are doing all that they can, kind of, if not to stop, but to make international trade more difficult. Now tariffs came, and Mr. Trump actually began a tariff war against everybody, even against his own allies, without knowing, I think, or I don't know what he thinks, but all normal people understand that if higher standards, high tariffs are bad for everybody because your own people pay for that. So of course, against it. Russia and China both stand for free trade, and we hope that. And it's quite ironic that the people who stood for it, I mean the West, for a long time, now stopped doing it. Even in Europe are now the same. There's the same move.
I see.
And the countries of global South are more pro-free trade nowadays.
Yes, indeed. We understand the President Xi, during the joint presser, Mr. Tangen, called for ensure stable and unimpeded industrial and supply chains. Now, of course, that's very crucial today because uncertainties is bad news for everybody. No business can really do, optimistic investment these days. Small, medium-sized enterprises all over the world are going to suffer, and they are suffering right now. Government policies cannot be churned out because they don't know how their trading partners are going to react and act. So how do you see Chinese president making a statement in Moscow today with the apparent visits by some 20 other leaders from the developing world coming to Moscow tomorrow on Friday? What does that mean today?
Well, I mean, obviously, Xi Jinping is the adult in the room. Putin, because of the situation in Ukraine, is not in the same position. China is the manufacturer to the world. It has the wherewithal, but I think the key point of what you talked about was small, medium-sized business entities. You have the United States, ironically, is saying the future is in the past. They want to go back to being industrial, to manufacturing. China's concentrating on the digital economy. That is the future. And if you start looking at where profits are going to be, it's definitely on that side. And what China is saying is we need a stable world that's going towards the future, not the past.
Interesting. Mr. Zhao, let me ask you, you mentioned the West many times in your answers, so do other panelists, but we are seeing a very busy news week today. For me, for example, you got several days in which China and European leaders interactively, intensively upon the celebration of 50th anniversary of China and European Union relations. And also we are seeing later in the week interactions between the Chinese and American officials on trade in Switzerland. Meanwhile, there is one occasion in which the presidents of Russia and China met, and meanwhile, there's going to be remembrance of what should be learned from the Second World War. So how should we understand this mix of news and the different voices, different approaches, interactions among very different parties?
Well, I think you're right. There's an ongoing, very complex situation among the major power relations. But I think from Beijing's view, that we are looking forward in stabilizing our relationship, not only with Russia, but also with our European colleagues, with also the United States. So to build up so-called a new model of the major power relations, in which I think the China-Russian relationship has become one of the model of that, because this kind of a relationship was not based on the ideologies or the pure interest, but with the common agenda and vision about the future world order. And also, this is, China and Russia are the two major neighboring countries. So that shows that the neighboring countries can achieve a peaceful coexistence and strategic coordination, and also the mutually beneficial cooperation. So I think this also, underscores the importance that why China and Russia should further strengthen and boosting our strategic coordination, and to show the world that there is a room and opportunity for the major powers to become to achieve more healthy and constructive partnership, rather than only fall in with those so-called major power rivalries or competition narratives.
Professor Lukin, we see the strategic coordination, that phrase, as well as pragmatic cooperation. This phrase has been used repeatedly in many of the interactions between the two leaders. What does that say to the pragmatism and also the urgency that both leaders are seeing in our world today?
Well, Russia and China are strategic partners. They have been for quite some time. I think like about 2 decades. So that's nothing new. But the idea of pragmatic cooperation is also important, because they are not allies. They are not formal allies, and there is no such no such goal. I mean, they are not military allies, for example. Because these two countries, this is, as it was rightly said, Russia and China are a perfect example of a new type of relationship of great powers, or big powers, like you say in China. And this is the kind of the world that we actually want to see. You asked what kind of world we want to see. We want to see a world where greater powers or big powers cooperate with each other, like they did during the Second World War, as allies, in a short period after the Second World War. Unfortunately, this cooperation collapsed because they began to, fight each other or struggle with each other, and the Cold War began.
Yeah.
I don't think we need a new third world war to understand that we all need to cooperate with each other in a way, just like Russia and China do, without necessarily agreeing on every single issue, but at the same time, think positively about this cooperation and each other.
Later in the year, we're likely to see, Professor Lukin, the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the UN United Nations system. We're also likely to see SCO summit, the BRICS summit, in which both China and Russia are key players for sure. So that also give us a lot of thoughts as to what kind of roles will these two countries play on these very different platforms. Earlier in international relations, we heard theories like so-called the regional sphere influence. Phrases like these are being churned out by intellectuals. Putting that aside, what kind of agenda do you think the two presidents, when they're together, can work on in order to pave the way for the success of some of the other big events later this year, such as BRICS, such as SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, later in Tianjin, of course, in which China, Russia, and many Central Asian countries, as well as others coming from different parts of Asia, are also joining. Tell us more about that. What kind of roles will these two different countries play on those platforms?
Well, Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS, you can call them pillars of the new multipolar world order. And they both grew from actually Russian-Chinese cooperation because Shanghai Cooperation Organization actually grew from the process of Soviet and then post-Soviet and Chinese talks, border talks. BRICS, Russian-Chinese cooperation was joined by India and later by Brazil and other countries. So it's important that the original founders, you can say, in both cases were Russia and China. And their role is that they give, these are organizations that are a bit different. SCO is a regional organization. Yeah. BRICS is a global group, but they both kind of represent interests of non-Western world or the global South and the agenda of the global South and non-Western world internationally. And the thrive of these countries to change or reform the global governance system. And Russia and China play a leading role in this process.
About Global South, mainly we're referring to the developing countries, but not necessarily just about them. So, Mr. Tangen, how much do you see China is putting emphasis on the Global South, that this issue will become a key one always, wherever the bilateral visit is, even this time in Russia?
Okay, I think the correct word is the rest of the world, because you have about 15% in Europe and America that are still clinging one fully to this colonial notion that has been around a long time. The whole point about the world is it is changing, it's multilateral. No one wants to go back to the colonial past. And as a result, they want to have security for their countries, they want to have a path for development, and they want to be respected as nations. No more interference in the elections of other entities. Let them be. And this is what I picked up on pragmatic actually means non-ideological. It is something where this is pure trade, the win-win, and a shared future for all.
Mr. Zhao, your thoughts?
Well, I think for in the joint agenda between China and Russia, we always emphasize on the multipolarity, and the global South is one of the key pillar of multipolarity. And China considers themselves as the member of the global South world. So I think China and Russia will continue to enhance such coordination within such a framework like not only under the UN, but also on SCO and BRICS, and further to support and advance the global multipolarity and stands against those unilateralism and abuse of those, unlawful sanctions and bloc-based confrontation. I think these lie in within those so-called joint agenda of both China and Russia for the future.
But do you see, Mr. Zhao, that the Global South might have the potential to provide alternatives, matured alternatives, at a time when the world is really struggling with what kind of reality are we dealing with right now?
Well, I think at least the global South countries are attempting or experiencing and providing some experiences in reshaping so-called the new world order, but not in a way to overturn the old one. So I think the key point here is the global South countries, including China, are offering some path or approach of reforming the existing world order and multilateral international system rather than build up a new one in the parallel. So I think that this is the key signal and message that both President Xi and President Putin are sending to the world together with other developing countries, that we are trying to be more constructive in building a more equal and sustainable and more, justice, the multilateral platform and cooperation, system,
Yeah.
rather than, building up the so-called anti-West bloc or etc.
Professor Lukin, how do you see today the reality that everybody is trying to have multilateral approach to different parts of the world to build new partnership, to renew their earlier partnerships and try to bring new meanings to cooperation, pragmatic cooperation, at a time when the world is faced with quite some challenge of uncertainty, Professor? What does that mean for Russia?
Well, I think it's quite a reasonable idea that, and also an inevitable tendency to multipolar world where there will be many centers of power, at least several centers of power, and they all would have multi-vectors, we say, policy of cooperation with each other without agreeing on every specific issue. And Russia would be happy to be part of this world and cooperate with other centers of power. Some would be closer to Russia, like China, for example, others probably not. But this is the only way to preserve peace. A different kind of policy, like the world divided into blocks, will only lead to chaos and war. And this, of course, unacceptable in the time where many countries have nuclear weapons which they can use during this war.
Mr. Tangen, very briefly before we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, the multipolar world is here. It's not going to happen. It is already here. There needs to be recognition of that. Donald Trump's gamble failed. The world is not going to be reshaped, and America and China and Russia have an important part to play, along with the others in BRICS and around the world.
Einar Tangen, Alexander Lukin, last but not least, Zhao Long. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on our live discussion today. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now. Have a good week.